the best of the week on Relevant Radio.
We'll go to Madison now and talk to Joel. Good morning, Joel. Welcome.
Hi, Patrick. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Nice to be on your show, asking about the difference between NFP and contraception, about the moral difference.
Sure.
Okay, so the first is, most often when I hear it explained by Catholic apologists, the moral distinction is that artificial birth control is pleasure-seeking, divorced from life, and NFP is respective of the woman and more in line with the natural order, and it doesn't divide the two. I simply haven't seen that as the case. And I think that one can admit that if we're describing the intentions, those intentions can be reversed based on the couple. A couple practicing NFP can be seeking intercourse, without desiring life. And a couple using artificial birth control, while it's an evil, they could still be desiring it because of noble reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's no illogic there, though, because, first of all, it's not a sin to enjoy the pleasure of marriage without intending to conceive a child, as long as you are open to that possibility by having marital intimacy in the natural way. So I think maybe an underlying confusion here is the erroneous assumption that the couple has to desire to procreate each time they engage in the marital act, and that's certainly not what the church teaches. And they can enjoy the marital act for the sake of their friendship and their union and their intimacy without consciously even thinking about having a child, as long as they do this in a way that is open to having children. I don't see an illogical issue here, but maybe I'm missing the point you're making.
I have a hard time seeing that a couple is open to it if they're practicing NFP in the first place. Because it sounds like you're making a distinction between desiring a child and being open to a child.
Well, I'll put it this way. If the marital act is engaged in the natural way without any contraception or action or barrier or chemical or what have you, then it's always possible for the transmission of life. It can be a lot less likely, given if it's taking place outside of the time of ovulation, but it's still possible. And so they are open to life. They're open to God's will. They're not doing anything sinful by engaging in the marital act because of the pleasure involved. It's not hedonistic because it's not closed off to the responsibility of procreation. And it's not contraceptive. It's making use of this good that God has ordained in a way that is morally permissible. So again, I don't see the illogic in that position. Unless I'm missing something, can you point out to me where it's illogical?
Yeah, I don't know how well I can articulate it. The first thing that comes to mind is that it just feels like it's against the spirit of the law.
Well, you have popes repeatedly saying, Pope Paul VI, for example, that the couple in no way does anything sinful if they practice natural family planning because they want to avoid conception at that time. I mean, the church repeats this, that there's no sin involved. So I wonder if maybe, I'm not accusing you of this, Joel, but perhaps you should examine your own thoughts and see if maybe there's a bit of scrupulosity involved here that's magnifying something into a sin that the church specifically says is not a sin.
I really don't think that's the case.
Okay.
I mean, it's something I could examine, but I'm very confident that this is a doubt in the logic.
Where?
And it may be an erroneous doubt, but I'm quite certain that's where it's coming from.
But can you show me where it is? Where is it illogical?
Whether it's something illogical or something ambiguous, but for the church to say that open to life is a necessity, I don't see how practicing a method that the sole purpose is to avoid conception is at the same time open to life.
If the act is performed in the way that is natural and open to life, then that means it's open to life. It means that if God chooses to bless that couple with a child, they haven't done anything to prevent that from happening, which would be the case in a contraceptive situation, but it's not the case here. And there is nothing sinful about not desiring to have a child at any given point. I think that may be an unspoken presumption on your part. I don't know, but it sounds like it's lurking in the background there that you're struggling with how is it that a married couple could not want to have a child and engage in the marital act in the natural fashion in a way that's open to life and not somehow be sinning? Well, the church says they're not sinning by doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they have the prerogative to try to determine, is this the right time for a baby? Is this not the right time? I mean, the prudential judgment of the couple is respected. And God made marriage in such a way that they have to be attentive to things like that. But the one thing they're not doing is closing off the possibility of procreation. They remain open to that. And so they're respecting God's role in this and doing nothing to interfere with it. So, I mean, with all respect, Joel, I really admire that you are paying due deference to your conscience, which of course you must do. We all must do that. But at the same time, I'm wondering if I can tell that your conscience isn't fully properly formed here, because it's a suspicion of something being sinful that the church has repeatedly said is not sinful. So I think that's where I was wondering about scrupulosity. But only you can make that determination. I'm just wondering about it.
Yeah, well, again, the reason I say it's not scrupulosity is that it's very much just an intellectual investigation for me. I'm a single man. So it's not a question that has any real impact on my life at this point. Mm-hmm. But it's something I'm passionate about, because I've seen plenty of married couples that practice NFP, and the disappointment that they have when they do become pregnant is kind of scandalizing. Because it's like, well, why are you disappointed if openness to life is a necessary part of the marital act?
It just shows that they maybe are not as spiritually mature as you would like them to be. That is a reaction to something that happens in life that people may or may not be happy about. But you can't judge the quality of the moral act on the basis of somebody's emotional reaction to it. That's not a sound way to evaluate it.
So I guess the moral principle, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that a moral principle of the marital act is that each and every act must be open to life.
Right.
And so the ambiguity for me comes in is because when I hear open to life, that very much sounds like something in the heart, like an intention, which, would be an emotion.
I suspected this was the problem, Joel, that an unspoken assumption on your part, which you just articulated, is that it's your intention to want or not want a child at any given point. And that's not what the church teaches. The phrase being open to life it's involving the physical nature of the act. And so if the physical performance of the act in any way prevents the possibility of the transmission of life, it would be deeply sinful. But if the act is physically engaged in a way that's completely natural and open to the possibility of life, that's what the church is referring to when it talks about being open to the possibility of life. It's not saying that in your heart you have to desire a child every time you engage in the marriage act. I wondered if that might be the sticking point, and now I see that it is. So you're laboring under a false assumption here that you have to, in your mind, desire to have a child every time you engage in the marriage act, and you don't. And there's nothing immoral about at any time in the marriage saying we would rather not have a child right now. But we're not going to do something that would prevent it from happening if it's God's will that it should happen. You see?
So I do see. I wasn't understanding that that's what you're getting at, but now I do, and I think you were right. Mm-hmm. But I also worry that that's quite a pastoral oversight when it's explained that openness to life is necessary. Maybe I'm the only one that assumed it was a position of the heart, but I'm more inclined to think that a majority of people who hear that moral principle, the way it's articulated, it sounds like it's an intention. It's a position of the heart, as opposed to the openness being inherent to the action itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I see your point. And I, of course, don't have any say in how NFP classes are taught at the parish level. But this conversation that you and I are having can very easily be picked up by NFP teachers or pastors or married couples, for further illumination on the topic. I think it's a good thing that we're talking about it. And maybe this issue that we're discussing right here will get picked up in the catechesis so that it will be made more clear. lest people be, confused about it.
Well, would that happens?
Yeah. Joel, you're clearly a thoughtful and devout young man, and I admire you. And I hope you don't feel as though I'm trying to beat you or anything like that, because I'm not. Would that more people approach the topic as thoughtfully as you do. Thanks for the call back, and I hope we talk again. Like what you just heard? Share it with your family and friends. And thanks for listening.